There's sort of two kinds of anger that we can experience. The two kinds of anger that we experience are unrighteous anger or righteous anger, okay? So unrighteous anger is any time that somebody comes against me and I don't get what I want. That's what it is. It's a self-centered source of anger. And then there's like righteous anger, and that's a real thing too, because we are people who've been created in a world where we care about right and wrong. And so we can have anger about any number of things that would be the right kind of things to be angry about. We can be angry about vulnerable people being oppressed. We can be angry about bullies. We can be angry about the way that the world works that is unkind to so many people or violent or evil. Like, we have things to be angry about in the world. And many of those kinds of things that we are angry about, it's a righteous anger because we know that something's not right in the world. So oftentimes unrighteous anger is something's not right with the world that I want. And righteous anger is something's not right with the world at large. There's something happening where there's people that are being hurt because of other people's actions. So we've got righteous and unrighteous anger. And remember, we said anger is always going to need a vent. So there's always going to be an action that comes out of anger. And so that's kind of down the other side of our graph is like, okay, when we vent the anger, is the vent unproductive or productive? Okay, so I've built you out a square, and in each square, we're going to have a different experience of anger. Okay, so let's walk through it. Let's say that you have unrighteous anger, and it's going to lead to unproductive action. Here's a perfect example. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You don't know the person. You don't know why they cut you off, but you feel angry about it, and you respond by like slamming on your horn or like shouting a curse word or putting your finger out the window, whatever you might do. That's unrighteous anger with an unproductive action that went with it, right? So in the unrighteous, unproductive, this is always going to be destruction. It's always destructive. And you might be like, well, Nicole, it's like not that destructive if I honk my horn. That's true. But you're adding like violence to the world. Like your response when you blow up, when you shout at someone, when you slam on your horn, when you gossip about someone who bothered you. Those are generally destructive forces. I think we can all acknowledge that venting our anger in an unproductive way might feel good for like half a second, but it doesn't feel good in the long term. Like, that's not a person that we're proud to be. And that's my experience with what people will say in the long term about being an angry person, is that even if at that time they were living out of hurt or feeling justified in what they did, when they look back at that time, they're not proud of that person. And so that kind of anger, when it's an unrighteous anger that has an unproductive action, will always lead to destruction. So there's a second kind of anger that we can have, and that's unrighteous anger with a productive action. Now you might be like, how could I be unrighteously angry and then have a productive action? Well, you can. Because what's incredible about being angry is that it is a catalyst often to tell us something deeper about what's going on within us. So let's go back to our traffic example. So I'm frustrated in traffic. There's a good chance that there's another emotion that got me to a place where the place that I needed to vent was in traffic. And there's all kinds of softer, more vulnerable emotions that anger can be a cover for. Those emotions are, I feel rejected. I feel disappointed. I feel anxious. I feel scared. I feel unseen. There's all this other that can be operating underneath of anger. And if a moment of anger or several moments of anger, let's say over the course of a week, are a catalyst for you to go deeper and say, wait, what's behind this anger? Then that actually becomes a productive experience. So what was an unrighteous anger becomes a productive action. And the word that I would write for that is repentance. Repentance simply means changing our mind and taking action in a different direction. So if I'm able to have a irritated or violent moment in traffic, and I'm able to allow that anger to bring me to a deeper place where I can get honest with myself and with the Lord about the fact that I'm anxious or disappointed or hurt, and I can confess that I don't want to be an angry person and I need help, healing, whatever, if I can connect with someone who loves me around that idea, then what was anger has now been transformed to a productive repentance that's helping me become more of who I actually desire to be. There's a whole nother kind of anger that I think we can miss talking about. And Maybe we're not missing it as much anymore because we're seeing it more and more in our culture, in this political environment, in navigating a pandemic together, in racial injustice and tension in our world and in our country. All of this stuff has now become part of our world. And you will feel things about it. And a lot of what we feel is anger. A lot of what we feel is frustration about complicated things. And many of us will experience that anger, but if we also think anger's bad, anger's a sin, I need to not feel angry, then we're experiencing something and it's a heightened response, but we're not going anywhere with it. And righteous anger that doesn't have the right vent will become unproductive action. And that righteous anger that's unproductive action, the word I use for that is foolish. And what doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't mean that it's stupid. It means that it's not productive in a way that can actually lead to good. And one of the deepest forms of unproductive action that's coming out of righteous anger, I think, is like a general cynicism and apathy toward our world. So there's a sense of like despair, like, I don't know how to fix this thing. It's way too complicated. It's frustrating, and I just want to shut off the news. I don't want to engage. I don't want to know anything about it. I'm going to become apathetic to these actual issues in the world because I don't know what to do about them. And I think especially for believers and as believers, we are called to be in this world and to care about and to love the people around us and to love our neighbor. And oftentimes we won't allow that anger about something that is wrong in the world to be transformed into something good. We will transform it into complaint or into fear, or sometimes we tribalize and we're like, well, I'm going to surround myself with people who believe like I do, who think like I do, because that way I can make my world a place that feels justified, and I won't have to deal with like the nuances and the complexities of these issues. I won't have to think about it. All of that is kind of in the bucket of foolishness because we're creating a world that isn't the world that we live in. And we really are called to be a part of transforming the world in any way that God has called us to be ambassadors of reconciliation, to be light, to be salt in the world, meaning like we actually are participating and engaging in the world. Okay, finally, and we got to it. How about righteous anger that's productive? Righteous anger with productive action is true justice. And we're called to justice. We're called to look for those who are oppressed, those who are vulnerable, those who are weak, and to do something about it. And you may be called to change the world in that way. Or you may be called to change the world in your family or in your neighborhood or in the environment around you. And understanding the ways that anger can work in our life to actually be a catalyst to a deeper character, to a deeper relationship with God, to a stronger connection with others in relationships in your life, and actually a connection into your purpose and into a calling that you can be part of being a force for good in a world that so desperately needs it. So I hope that you will engage your anger, and the next time that you find yourself really frustrated, really irritated, you would slow down and ask, what's behind this? And what would it look like, no matter where this anger's come from, what would it look like for me to allow it to be transformed into productive action?